Task force members, members of the public, welcome to the second meeting of the Warner Task Force. My name is Toby Berkman. I'm facilitating the meeting.
Rachel Shreve, also from CPI.
So welcome to everyone. I'm going to go over the agenda in just a minute. Just want to say that coming into this meeting, we really have two main goals that we are hoping to accomplish. One is to really work to help task force members, to help you all begin to develop a shared understanding of where are you all coming from in terms of what you think success for this process looks like. What do you hope this process delivers? Where are there similarities? Where do you have shared goals? Where are there differences? So we really want to begin to develop that kind of understanding of where we're beginning from. And then we also want to spend some time continuing to clarify what we're going to do in terms of our approach as a task force, what our work plan is going to be, issues like criteria that we might use to make a decision. So all those are going to be under our work planning conversation. So let me go ahead and share some slides with you all that have the agenda. So let's see that. Yeah, great. Okay. So we're going to do the election of chair or co-chairs in just a minute. We're then going to review and hopefully approve the minutes from February 8th. Then we have a group activity around success, trying to understand what success looks like for different members. We're going to then give a summary of the onboarding call that Rachel and I did. So we're really pleased to say we did have a chance to speak with every task force member between the last meeting and this one, which is fantastic. We want to share some of what we learned so you all know what we know. And then we're going to discuss the work plan before next steps and ending. Okay, so let's move into the first, actually, before we move into the actual official items on the agenda, I do want to address one issue that came up. This was something that we sent an email to the task force about, but we want to also be transparent about this to the public as well, since this is the public meeting.
Got it.
All right, so okay, good. All right. So there were some concerns raised by members of the public, and we know that task force members also had concerns about potential conflict of interest with CBI. CBI worked for ORS. ORS was a client of CBI in 2008 to 2009. My colleague Patrick Field was the CBI staff member working on that. That was before Rachel or I joined CBI, and so we were not involved. CBI's role in that project was to essentially be a neutral, gathering and reporting on stakeholder interests and concerns about dam removal. There's a report online that anyone can access that basically summarizes what CBI did and what the outcome of that was, what the stakeholder perspectives were that they learned about. So you are all welcome to go look at that. And I want to just say, you know, we as mediators, as facilitators, really take seriously our role as neutrals. We are not here to advocate on behalf of any substantive outcome. We are here to help manage an impartial, fair process. But we also understand that perception really matters, and that regardless of what we say, trust needs to be earned over time. So I just want to say to everyone in the task force, members of the public, concerns about whether we are managing a fair process are entirely justified and legitimate. And we expect and welcome being held accountable to managing a fair and impartial process. And we don't ask you to trust us. We ask you to watch what we do and ensure that we are acting in a trustworthy way. So I think we'll leave it there for now. It's not an agenda item for today's meeting. If any task force members feel like the role of CBI and partiality needs to be an item of discussion on a future agenda, we can certainly talk about that and get it on an agenda. And Rachel, anything you want to add on that? Great. Okay, so we're going to now move to the first item on our agenda, which is the election of chairs or chair or co-chairs. So as we go into this conversation, just want to briefly name a little bit of what we heard in the one-on-ones to just inform the task force discussion on this issue. We heard from you all that if we elect a chair or co-chair, that individual or individuals should or could have a role of supporting Rachel and myself in improving our agendas and work plans, helping us understand what you task force members really need and want in these meetings so we can make them as useful as possible. There is a potential role as points of contact for external communication about what the task force is doing. So keeping the public informed, for example. And then in general, a real feeling like if they're specifically if there are co-chairs, that it'd be really important that they be collaborative with each other, be communicative with each other, that they speak essentially with one voice, and if anyone is approaching one of them, they immediately loop in the other. And that they're also, of course, representing the task force and sort of speaking with what we decide as a voice. This is the voice we want to be shared. There were some mixed perspectives on the need for chair or co-chairs. And I think just the key substantive points we've heard raised on that is a real interest in continued professional and impartial facilitation of the task force, and to create a safe space for participation, and also that task force members be really seen as equals, that there is not sort of a hierarchy, some people being above or more important than others. Also, a real interest in ensuring that the deciding of co-chairs or chairs does not derail our group, that we want the focus to be on the issues. We want to move expeditiously on that, knowing how much we have to accomplish. And that also co-chairs or chairs don't become like a focus point for outside pressure. People trying to use influence our process in a way that doesn't feel appropriate. So we name all that, and I just want to say we are very happy I think our suggestion for today is that if this is an easy issue to resolve, we have two people who are interested in this, for example, who represent different constituent groups in a way that feels good and reasonable to the commission, that it might make sense to vote on that today and get these appointed and move forward. If this seems like it could be needing a larger conversation and we're not really clear on how to move forward, we actually suggest that we table the issue and kind of continue working and exploring and seeing what makes sense moving forward. So an idea we had is we could, for example, do some ad hoc outreach and bring specific task force members into our planning conversations, maybe on a rotating basis, and revisit the issue of co-chairs later. But that said, we are sort of not clear where this conversation will go, and I think our hope is that it might just be easily resolved. Okay,
So we're excited to see that.
yeah. So I will just say during our onboarding call, we did, hear from at least two people who were willing and were interested in being co-chairs. So I hope okay to identify them yet. So Chris and Bill suggested those to us, but we also did not sort of explicitly ask everyone in this conversation. So I want to just open the floor if anyone is interested in being a co-chair besides Bill or Chris. You guys need to speak next. You're interested.
I am.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, anyone else?
Can I just cover a tiny bit of
Please,
housekeeping?
absolutely, yeah.
So, because this is a hybrid meeting, and I think we only have members of the task force in the room tonight. Do we have any members of the
There's,
task force that are online?
An ex officio is online, at least one.
Okay, because normally public meetings start with a call to order. And,
Yeah.
and an acknowledgement of who's present from the board or committee that's meeting. So I think that, it's all well and good to dive right into the work, but we also want to try to make sure that we're doing that. That's one of the functions that the clerk would normally handle, but, so if, I guess I'm just gonna really quickly cover that. If there's anybody online who's a member of the task force, would you unmute and just identify yourself so that the public knows you're present?
I'm Solomon Ibarra from the Town of Concord Engineering Division.
Anyone else? Okay, maybe just quickly go around the room then and just everybody say their name that's on the board. We start all the way down there with Bruce.
Bruce Rose. Stenaro, Vicky Alani.
Paul Dome.
Brilliant, okay?
Kirk Owens.
David Owen.
Liz Morrison now,
Mark Howell.
Toby Burton.
Rachel Reed,
Scott Bryant.
Bill Kameza.
Sven Viva.
Keith Hanna, Jeff Collins.
Okay, thanks. It just puts us on the right side of the open meeting law from the point of view of having a hybrid meeting. Okay. Sorry for that interruption.
Good question. You mentioned two names of volunteers that, can you repeat who these were? I think you mentioned two names.
Bill or Chair.
Oh, Bill and Chris, and then Malcolm also
Yeah,
expressed
so-
an interest in this conversation.
Oh, Chris?
Yeah.
And
And Bill.
well, yeah.
No.
Right, identify.
Great. So, great, we have, three folks who are fantastic. I think what we'll do now is maybe give each of the three of you a chance to say a few words about what you would hope to bring for the role of, co-chair, since it's even out of assume, since we have people, but we can decide that if necessary. And then if there's need for further discussion, we can, but my suggestion would be just do a vote for those three people, and the top two vote getters would be the co-chairs, assuming that, we feel comfortable with those two people when that's the pair, once that voting takes place. If that's an okay procedure with the task force, I'll give a chance if anyone objects. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and give folks a opportunity to share.
just a
Yeah.
brief statement of
Yeah.
what your interest in, why you think, what you would bring to the group in terms of being co-chair.
So maybe we'll just go in clockwise order. Chris, do you want to kick us off?
I think that, number one, I feel that I understand the value of the mission of this task force. It's very important to me to come to a conclusion that we all or most are happy and satisfied with. I think that I'm approachable, and I'm pretty fair and open-minded. I also am very collaborative. I mean, I was a teacher for 18 years, and believe me, if I can bring together 25th graders, in a room and get them working on a project and having them all engaged, I think, that's a pretty good collaborator and organizer. And I think that I bring those qualities to this group.
Yeah, as I said to folks who mentioned it to me, I'm offering to serve, but I'm perfectly happy not to serve too in this role. And since I wasn't really present at the last meeting, but on the Zoom, I want to mention a few things about myself. If you don't know me, and then I was thinking about what to say if this came up. I have lived in Concord for 43 years. I've raised two sons here, one of whom teaches at the high school. The other still lives in town. And in fact, he volunteers in another town committee. And all the time that I've lived here, I actually have found Concord to be my strength and my refuge. The community has been very important to me. I've been involved in many things in the past. I'm still part of a monthly potluck group from Concord that's been going for over 35 years. Town natural resources are really important to me. I canoed, I walked every trail, as I mentioned before. I think, as I looked at a map, I canoed and kayaked every water body. And like Keith, I remember pulling water chestnuts back in 1996 with Dan Monahan from Waters Pond. I did serve on the Natural Resources Commission. In fact, I chaired it back when Dan Monahan was the director. And then that was like 30 years ago. And then when I retired from my profession 7 years ago, I was asked to serve on the Tax Fairness Committee in town, which I did until its work was completed. And that was to try to find ways to reduce the property tax burden on people with limited assets. Now, professionally, just quickly, I've been an educator, just like Christine. Before retiring, I've been head of Boston College High School for 17 years. I taught there. I was principal of the school. It's an independent school in the city on 47 acres near the University of Massachusetts. It has 1,500 boys. You want to talk about bringing people together? And from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, economically diverse, racially diverse, geographically diverse. I used to think that the school is best be characterized as having Metco in reverse. We bus kids in from the city, from the suburbs into the city, and we make them into city kids before they graduate. That was our goal. About half the students there are on scholarships, and it covers about half of their tuitions. Because it was a significant institution in the city, I've had a lot of experience working with individuals and groups and other institutions, trying to achieve a consensus often on competing goods. Someday ask me about minor league baseball, and I can tell you about a whole fiasco around that with the city. Working through conflicts that allow us to find the greater good. That was my goal in most cases. And I learned to be effective. You had to trust one another, and that starts with being a really good listener and being transparent. And that's been the kind of style of leadership that I've had. Quickly say about Warner's Pond and Neshoba Brook, I recognize what a treasure it is that we have here. And I approach this process with a completely open mind and heart. And I really do look forward to getting to know you, trusting and in you that we'll be able to find that consensus to go forward on the pond. That's right.
It's much built and nothing.
So I've lived in Concord, I forget now, nearly 30 years. But I've always had work that has prevented me from getting deeply engaged with the town. So since I retired 5 years ago, I've become much more involved, and that's something that I am excited about and would like to do more of. I find the topic that we're addressing around Warner's Pond to be truly fascinating. As I've read more and more about the issue of saving ponds versus taking dams down, I realize how complex the issue is, how many stakeholders there are involved, and the complexity of bringing them all together to find a satisfactory solution. I've also spent a lot of my time professionally in organizational development, teaching small organizations how to create boards and committees and how to run them. And I've also served as chair of the International Health Section of the American Public Health Association, and also as chair of the Intersectional Committee. So I have some good high-level experience of chairing committees.
So much. So just hearing from the three of you, I think we are guaranteed some dedicated, excellent folks to help us out. So it's great. So given that we're electing co-chairs, I think we think it makes sense to vote for up to two. So you can vote for one, you can vote for none, you can vote for two. Okay, and we'll take the top two vote getters and objections to how that ends up. So I think we'll just go in the same order and do show of hands. Does it need to be anonymous, or should it be? Should it be?
Could I ask just a general question,
Yeah.
maybe a sense of the board?
Yeah.
I think there's a basic choice between, should we think about electing a single chair, or should we go with a co-chair model? And maybe we should start with just parsing that and decide whether or not we want to, which way we want to go with that. And then once we know that, then we'd be able to craft an election system to match that.
So if that feels like an important option that people want to talk about, we can. Yeah.
I think that's a big question. I have a couple questions too
Yeah,
about
please.
this. I mean, given the time, we want to either make a decision tonight or quickly, or put this off for another meeting. This is not an issue of urgency as far as CBI is concerned. We know that there are mixed feelings amongst all of you. So one question I have is whether the group wants to proceed with this tonight, or whether you want time to think about it.
Yeah, I would actually like to wait, because I'd love to hear the feedback of the one-on-ones to see what issues have come up with people. Because I just don't know everything enough yet to kind of like dive into, let's have a leader now, you know, it kind of feels like there's more to talk about.
Right.
First.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Yeah.
And first, just like to thank Chris Malcolmville for volunteering, and say since there's disparate voices coming to the group, grappling together, I think co-chairs would help us have anyone, if all of us avoid single perception, if one person sort of is there. and the other isn't.
And I agree with that too. So,
Yeah, I'm in favor of the co-chair model. There's a lot of work, number one. There are a lot of skills that are needed here. It's more than one skill, so combining some skill sets, two people is a minimum. As far as urgency, there isn't any urgency. My only thought would be, I'd like the chairs, the task force, that participation role in setting the agenda and working with you, as opposed to facilitators running the meeting, that co-chairs sooner than later getting this going, because time is of the essence. If we wait too long, I mean, I agree, we should hear some more, but sooner than later.
Sooner rather than later.
For a vote, I'm sorry,
Yes, for selection.
to make a
Well,
decision.
not today. I mean, we could defer to a little later in the meeting.
Yes,
It'd be great to do that today.
but it would, if people are ready, I want it clear that choosing or not choosing chair, co-chair or tonight doesn't change the speed at which we expect to proceed on the work. We can go forward with the work on two paths, sort of on the, you all need to be ready and comfortable about choosing co-chairs. They are the sort of point of contact and maybe, and a part of setting agendas and sort of keeping the group in communication. So it's important for you to feel comfortable with that, but it doesn't change our ability to keep the work going and make decisions, which is what a lot of tonight is for, which is why we either want to vote and feel like everybody's ready, or we'll just take a pause and we'll talk about it the next meeting. Yeah.
I do agree also with the co-chairs, it's a big room, there's a lot going on that it's easier with two people. And on the other hand, and as well, I like Vicky's comment that, if we hear about the one-on-ones, then maybe that will put us in a better frame of mind to determine, what are the needs, and then give us the ability to better vote.
Seeing sort of head.
So
Yeah.
are we suggesting that we table this until after the feedback, but keep it in today's meeting?
I'm hearing head, yeah, I'm hearing that in head nods. We can be efficient. We can probably fit it in later, just move it. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that's fine. But let me just ask as a point of clarification, this is really a question for you, Mark, on the open meeting law piece. Could we do an anonymous vote, asynchronously, like online between meetings if you wanted that, or would that constitute deliberation?
I think that's, yeah.
No, okay, yeah, okay. So it has to be
I'm
public
not-
at the meeting.
I'm
Yeah.
not even sure that we could do a private vote first, but it's.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
So there's that.
Okay.
So I think there might be a number of ways to solve this, and I'm perfectly comfortable with the notion of working together a little bit to get a sense of that. This is just an idea, but it might even, since there's three of you, and thank you again, appreciate that. Thank you for volunteering. I'm almost inclined to ask you whether you guys want to talk with each other and then maybe come back to the group and say, this is what we think we could do.
Yeah.
It's-
Meet tonight during the.
Yeah, either tonight or between, we could decide that was, something that we were gonna work out in between now and the next meeting. It's just an idea because, most committees do in fact kind of informally have those discussions about how they want to be led and who they want to do it with. And since we're so new and have been kind of all thrown together, you know, so it's instant committee, we don't have the benefit of, you know, people have worked with each other for a while and kind of know what the dynamics are gonna be. It's just one thought.
Yeah.
So what do you think about just tabling this for later in the meeting, and then you can decide then whether you want to do it today or another time, and that kind of covers all the
Sure.
options. Yeah, yeah.
I definitely like Mark's,
And give them a chance.
more
It's tough, right.
time to see gentlemen that have the street talking to each other.
Yeah.
And, just come to a consensus instead of just to kind of
Random voting.
official
Yeah. Yeah.
king's
Yeah.
election. King's election.
Drowning the-
I don't even think we'd have a chimney for the white.
Okay, so I think that sounds good. We're gonna, table this for now. We'll return at the end of the meeting and see if folks want to vote then or want to just let the nominees, so to speak, talk among themselves and see what they think next. So with that, let's move to our next agenda item. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn over to Rachel now.
Well, this is a group exercise, but you do it individually. And called defining-
Please. We have.
Oh, excuse me, you're right, yeah, I skipped that slide, thank you. Appreciate that, you're demonstrating your capacity. Co-chair already. Yeah, so, is that doing that? Great. So here are the minutes, they were sent around in draft form, I just want to note a handful of changes and highlight those to you all. This red line was sent out as well. So this here basically adds a interest that was suggested by a task force member that was brought up in the meeting, but not specifically noted in the minutes. So we added that there and included it in the bullet that was describing various interests that were making going around the table in our introductions. Okay. Do that second. So that's one change. And then another change is this here, the nature of the response. So there's a question, would the Boy Scouts be able to participate and to visit? And the response here, the second sentence was clear that this was an issue for the task force to decide, visits, and who were participating in those. The summary of the response here was yes, and then that, which was contradictory, right? The accurate plus said maybe this is up to the task force. Sure. So those are the two changes that we got. Any concerns about those? Anyone wants to finish rolling first? Yeah.
So, I don't know, I can't recall that we pointed out that it's in charge now to preserve an annual ceremony of Boy Scouts. Not that I just like it, but before ingraining something into the charter, we should know what it is and what it entails. I don't know, potentially it has something ingrained that limits our options. It needs to be done. I have no idea.
Yeah. So let me just clarify. This is saying when we did our introductions and our go around, people shared different experiences and different interests that they had. One of it is not anything to do with our charter or what we're saying we need to achieve. This is just, hi, my name is so-and-so. This is my background. This is my interest in being on the task force. One of the task force members in that conversation said that they had an interest in the annual ceremony conducted by the Boy Scouts, Scout Island. And so this is reflecting that that interest was named. All right. So with that point of clarification, is there any concerns, further concerns?
I just have one
Yeah,
additional
please.
comment, yeah. When these are filed, I know that the slides from that meeting are already up on the webpage. But would whoever filed these with the clerk actually add those slides at the bottom so that the minutes contain not only these records, but also the slides that were shown in the meeting. So normally presentation materials should be included with the file.
So it's in a single file.
Yeah, like one big PDF, yeah, because you never know, the web page can change under the covers in this point in time. So, I would just meant to add, suggest add, so I'm not saying we change anything, just tack them on at the end.
Okay, great, thanks, Mark. Certainly do that. Any other concerns? Absence, any from the task force, I think we'll say these minutes are approved as revised, if we post
So
it.
you just want to have somebody make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting.
A second.
Second, okay,
All in favor?
all in favor? Okay. All opposed? Okay, minutes are officially approved, okay.
First official.
Yeah, first official announcement, right, all right, so with that.
Okay, so we would like to have you do a visioning exercise about defining the check. So we're gonna give you each here, we're gonna give each, sorry, a piece of paper. You just pass this. This is, I know, try to.
The first test.
Yeah.
So this is what we'd like you to do. We would like you to imagine it is 2025. And the work of the task force has ended.
2024.
2025. 2025, and the work of the task force has ended. The task force has been highly successful in fulfilling its charge, and you are extremely proud. One morning you open the Concord Bridge and you see that there's a feature article about the task force highlighting the key things that you are most proud of regarding our success. Write the headline and a sub-headline if you want for this article. Be specific about how and why the task force was successful. So we'd like you to just take 5 minutes to do this. We'd like you to write it, and remember, this is a headline. We're going to post all of the, we'll post all of your paper on a wall in here somewhere, and we'll just take a quick walk through. There are members online. You should have a link, an email to Toby and mail him your headline and or sub headline, and we will write it for you and post it and take you through the gallery.
And if you are also welcome if you want to do more than one headline.
Right.
Fine.
There are multiple minds on what success would mean. That's okay.
Right, large and legible.
Yes, large and clearly. The people online, we're gonna take a photo once they're all up, so we give us.
I'm running the whole, I'm doing everything.
You're kind of already submitted.
I'm ready.
Really easy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so you wanna get back, you know, yeah. Take a moment. And then let's talk a little bit here about being themes, their story and our change. But overall. It makes me very proud. And put up. Other thoughts? Reactions? No? Other folks? Yeah. Kobe and I were, yeah, there's a sense of, there's a gentle odd and there's a sense of like, thought, you know, like vision beyond all expectations, right? Like, if these obstacles overcome, there's a recognition of the effort that can go into this process. I love the unanimous, you know, this. So is this, you know, is this anything, are there things that surprise you? That you've seen from your colleagues, from traffic, anything about this? Right? So here's one, put a big picture of it at all times, and things are down. And send it out, keep it in mind. Thanks, Bob. I don't know, I went through it.
Well, it's kind of. Good thing.
So is it put into, can you download it as?
Yes, yeah. So thanks. It's not that, problematic for you guys. It feels more like paper if you. Get on this.
Yeah, it does. No, we did look into, that one.
Yeah, you have an agenda, so they have to have, okay, synchronized.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have that. I'm still testing. Yeah, I got a big test.
That's the way to do it. That's the way.
That's called, the company is called.
Yes. What is that? No, that's all right.
I'm sorry to run again.
Okay, everyone. We can have you back. All right, I'm gonna move on, to talk about the summary of the onboarding call, and what we learned. Next slide. Oh, there it is. So, there are a few slides here, so I won't go through every single item, you'll have these, and you can read them yourselves at your leisure. Some of the people we spoke to have a very strong connection to the pond, some people had no connection. There's a lot of discussion of the recreational values of the pond currently, as well as in the past, and then hopes for the future. So watching walking, bird watching, fishing, sitting, viewing our current values, the fisheries and the wildlife value, the value of the pond as a natural resource, the neighborhood, community resource aspects, cultural and historical significance, scenic beauty, and soundscape. And these are sort of the overarching issues that came up. I'm gonna go through all these and come back to you about things that we missed or we didn't understand or things we want to add. So there are also some concerns and some hopes. You all had there's a lot of commonality, I should say, in what we heard. So the use of the pond is limited by its condition and by climate change. the past recreational uses, which people often have very fond memories of swimming and canoeing and sailing and skating, are not possible for various reasons, including condition and climate change. That the current use of the pond seems to be underutilized by the community. The lack of access hampers use. There's a hope and desire for improved natural resources or natural resource value and recreational use of the pond, either at Warner's Pond or elsewhere in West Concord in the vicinity. And then there were several people mentioned Giroux Park. And then there's a hope and a desire to improve fisheries and the linkage to the Assabet River. So we start kind of narrowing down here. We can move to the next slide. So then there were the questions about the task force process, which I'm sure none of you will be surprised at. There's confidence that the task force has the expertise and knowledge to carry out the charge. There's confidence that there's the right mix of members and representation. There's confidence that the members will be able to keep an open mind. And then we move into sort of hopes and concerns. We hope for transparency and open-mindedness and to inspire confidence in the community that this is a fair process. And then there's concern about division and conflict among the task force members. It's very normal, all these are normal concerns amongst town groups. There's a mild concern that the town residents don't know or don't care about these. And I characterize some of these in terms of level of concern, mild as opposed to just concern. Mild concern that there won't be adequate support at town meeting for whatever recommendation the task force makes, and then mild concern that the December 2 deadline may not be achieved. And then the other area that we really wanted to focus in on was, what do you want to know? What do you want to find out for each alternative? And again, this really was a full array. Everybody had a lot of the same items to list. The financial costs, the methods, the whole cultural and historical significance of the pond, the effects of any kind of project on all of the different uses, whether it's recreation and human use or effects on wildlife, fisheries, other natural resource values, accessibility of the pond, accessibility of use of recreation, legal and liability issues, possibilities and connections to the broader landscape, future of Concord, the whole sort of long-term view of the community, the larger community. So just stopping there for a minute, is there anything here that just kind of strikes you as funny or raises a flag, or you feel like we missed something important? Yes.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's the difference between those, I think the first thing that you said is that there are people who are connected and less connected to the pond, because the list I felt like of the current activities, I feel like the people who are on the pond did skate this winter, they played hockey on the pond this winter, even though it was like a very mild winter. They kayaked, they canoed. In fact, we took groups canoeing and kayaking on the pond. So the fact that it says that those are not possible because of the current state of the pond is actually false, because it's being done like all the time. And if it were cold, skating would also happen more. Like, I think people were quite sad that it melted 2 days after a really beautiful skating week that we had on the pond. So those things are happening. It's not that they're not happening because of the state.
Okay. I didn't have that.
I interviewed Vicky.
Okay.
Well, I will also say that one thing to note is it's not like everyone would agree with every bullet on this. We're
right.
kind of putting things together that
Right.
reflects
That's true. There's
various perspectives.
right. There's a lot of overlap in things that were said, but there are, right, we didn't hear the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a question for clarification on the liability and legal issues. I haven't really thought about those in the context of the alternatives. Just, I don't know. Somebody wants to clarify that. That's a concern, but if you want to find out, I don't know. understand that. Maybe I should.
Yeah, and obviously one of the comments that came up, like, this is the quality. You've been, yeah.
One of the areas of liability had to do with methods. For instance, creating berms or creating different landforms in the pond through one of the alternatives, and what would that mean if it was a collapse or there was something that happened that affected a private property owner on the pond or the Scout Island. You know, there was a liability concern. It wasn't that someone knew that there was going to be liability, but the question whether there was liability or legal.
So it's kind of related to the possible failure of some.
Yeah, some structure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it could also be that another person also mentioned flooding, and will there be a private property impact, right? That's, you know, water issues related to anything that happens.
Unintended.
Unintended, of course, none of these none of these would be malicious or have, you know, intent.
I guess I would say it's not just a concern of failure. Something there, just say on Scout Island, just right now, it's not very accessible, so there aren't people out there. If it's accessible, say a berm, then will there be people out there anymore? And what
Oh, if someone-
liability would that bring?
Right. Right,
Don't
injury
know.
on, right, injury on private property.
Okay, good point.
David, that's a question. Are people allowed, I mean, what's the scouting position now? Are people allowed on that? I mean, the island and generally?
Well, we're not patrolling it.
No, we're not patrolling.
But when
I know we do. all the
scouts
but-
use it, they contact the scout house, they ask permission.
Right.
And then we tell them they also need to file for a permit with the town
Yeah.
to be camping out there.
No. Good, okay.
So this summary of information, I tried to be really deliberate about that, because I think that it will be useful to you as you start to talk about the work. So then this is sort of a catch-all in the end about like
So,
other
I'm sorry,
considerations.
can I just go back to the point that Vicky made that, on the prior slide, that, you know, because we do hear from people that, and we certainly have observed that there are current activities of canoeing, kayaking, and ice skating. So it's interesting to me that that didn't come out in the onboard. Sorry, go ahead.
I know, I brought up like concern about ice skating, like not being able to do it as frequently and like what projected forward, what would that look like? So I know I had brought that up, not that we haven't to do it now, but that we don't want to go out on our canoe anymore, it's smelled bad and like,
Right.
you know, we only
But
had
do
the one
people feel
weekend.
like that, because it seems to me, from what I've heard in the process that we've been involved in, is that people are able to canoe and kayak early in the season and much later in the season. And ice skating is, as you said, I mean, it's occurring every year with maybe less frequency than it has in the past. And who knows what is gonna happen moving forward. But I wonder if that might maybe be modified a little bit just to reflect that there are current,
Yeah.
but more limited uses.
Yeah.
happening.
If we didn't hear that clearly enough, I mean, I didn't hear it clearly enough, but that's neat. And certainly we can revise it to reflect that more directly. I think it's really, I mean, it's important to you, and if it's truly happening, people feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can, it's no problem. No problem at all.
Yeah, we hate for people to walk around and say, we heard it's not being used anymore.
Right.
It's unusable.
Absolutely.
That would be what comes out of that first line, but it's just not.
And that's why we want to show this to you, so that we can get your input on anything that we missed or misheard.
So you might want to strike that whole piece. Past recreational uses are not possible?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
not,
being
that's not true.
justified.
Yeah, okay.
But in order to capture, so it sounds like it might have been, Liz, your comment that it's,
It feels like it's, you know, again, it feels like it's lighting. 5 years ago, we moved in all the time, and last year I don't remember doing once, we did the last this year. So,
Right, there were people who expressed regret, like, I don't have, not regret, but like sadness, that there were things that they remembered doing years ago that they couldn't do anymore, they couldn't do as much, and that's really what this is.
so maybe it should, maybe it's, instead of saying use is not possible, to
It's
replace that with diminished.
Yeah, less easy or something.
Right.
But definitely we'll make a note of that and definitely update that. So, and give it some thought, because there's time for us to update before we
Yeah.
make it final. So think about it and look at it tonight. And let us know if you have other comments or amendments or revisions that you think we should make, so that it really reflects what the task force is. This really is a lot about feeling. We're not collecting data on how many times you went skating this year versus last year. We're really capturing your feelings about the pond.
Clarifying, so people swim in the pond?
There were some swimmers.
Yeah.
I saw swimmers. And I don't want to reveal anything, that's gonna get anyone into trouble, but yes.
Yeah, just remember that it's not supposed to be a data kind of thing, is that it's what you are, it's for yourselves.
It was even a New Year's Day punch. This is not happening. Yeah.
I'm just curious about the third bullet. Scenic viewing and fishing, definitely. Walking, I've walked around the pond many times, but it's not exactly designed for walk. I mean, there's no path, there's nothing.
But when it freezes, people walk.
Sorry?
When it freezes, people walk that whole pond and the island.
Well, it freezes, yes, but you, I mean, I'm not a great one for walking around, but just general. I mean, there's access points to the pond. There's no walking trail.
Yeah, that was clear, but people talked about walking there to around and close or some, like walking. I wanted to capture it. That was my take on it. It's something people did. They went there on purpose to walk. So even if it wasn't there for a hike, it was really important, I thought.
I'm curious when people were thinking about this, were they thinking of Thoreau as a conclusion because, well, because it's on the rim, or this was everything other than Thoreau?
I mean, my take on it was, several people mentioned Giroux, but it was distinct. It was a comparison to, or a side discussion about the town's work at Giroux. It wasn't, there was no, if you're, are you thinking that there's people were, that we were
No,
mixing
just
up?
on the walking part, I mean,
Oh,
easily walking Thoreau.
yeah.
That's, I mean,
We all,
I'd
that's
call that
not,
an amble rather.
yeah.
That wasn't part of the.
So interestingly, I've heard from some neighbors who live here much longer than me, that there used to be a way to circumnavigate. When the bridge went over Route 2, that bridge got cut off and that's been cut off. So I think there are people who used to walk the entire. I haven't done it personally, but there was a way to do it. And now that bridge is down
It's true.
and they can't do it
It wasn't exactly a safe bridge.
Wait,
No.
no, I heard that too,
Could be
but
deadly.
they did do it, so maybe that's the walking that they're remembering, sort of reminiscing of that one.
Well, just maybe a suggestion that we can take back that I think I'm hearing from the group. This slide right now is framed as concerns and hopes about the pond. Which reflects sort of what people said they wanted to see improved about it, right? I think there's another piece of information that we're hearing that's pretty clear is how are people in this group currently enjoying, right? What are those activities? And we heard a lot about that, to be clear. There are folks who are still fishing on it, right? Enjoying the wildlife, right? Watching the sunsets, right? But also many of those same people noting that they'd like to see it better, right?
So essentially, basically, some recreational uses have been hampered by the conditions of the pond.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
So that's good to know. We'll continue collecting your comments, making revisions to get this to where it's comfortable for everybody. So then there are just these other sort of broad considerations about the work. Sort of this is really more going toward reviewing the work plan and reviewing how what the task force will think about as you move forward in the work. And these are kind of broad concepts. So environmental impacts of the selected alternatives should be linked with improvements to natural resources for recreational use of Warner's Pond, or they should be in the vicinity of Warner's Pond. So the idea that there's a an overall benefit in the end. No matter what the choices in the end about what to do, that there will be an improvement. And it will either happen at Warner's Pond, or it will happen near Warner's Pond, or there will be a combination, but it will be better than it is now. It won't just be left. As one person said, as a mud puddle. There will be sort of a full understanding that the future needs to look better than it looks now. At least that's the hope. That all the future long-term implications of any decision, so financial, natural resources, climate resilience, the use by the community, everything needs to be part of the review, and that kind of leads us into the envision Concord document. And then this idea that, you know, what is the really people were really expressing, and I think that your headlines also express this about what is the best solution for the town. And that broader look to the whole community, not just the neighborhood and not just the current users, but the value of this resource to the entire town. And that the fairness and transparency and open-mindedness of the task force is crucial to success. You've all done a fabulous job of expressing that in your headlines and, you know, and just telling us how you. Any other comments? Yes.
On the last bullet, I agree with that, best solution for the town. I don't know if the comment to you, I've been thinking about some Warner's Pond as an integrated resource, which goes sort of beyond the boundaries of the town. It's the road, it's the river.
Yeah.
And you know,
We
other things
definitely
are
heard
already
about
happening,
Yes.
Yeah,
the rail trail.
yeah,
So, I mean,
yeah,
it's probably captured in there, but just something I'll drop. I would like
Yeah.
to keep that in mind as we find a solution.
Yeah.
For the pond, but part of an integrated solution, that
Yeah.
improves the value of the whole system. I think.
yeah, we heard, and this I think could probably be expressed more clearly here, a lot of comments along those lines. We really need to be thinking about this resource as part of a larger system of recreation and wildlife and ecology, right? And be thinking about it as those holistic resources as meaningful for West Concord, meaningful for the area, and should account for the needs of that area and the future of that area and changes that are happening there. MCI, population growth, for example.
For me, that falls under the category, the best solution for the town.
Yeah, yeah.
The bottom.
And it's, yeah. Yeah, the thing I would say sort of in conclusion to all this is that we heard a tremendous amount from you, and you were all just so articulate and engaged in this and really told us a lot. And so it was a challenge to try to boil it all down. We have pages of, you know, notes from everyone. But it was really appreciated. This was a really important exercise for us to go through to really understand your mindsets about this and to also understand the complexity of the issue at hand. I mean, and one of the things that we'll have to balance is that idea of this large planning. You can get into this very big planning view down the road for the community, and it can become unwieldy, you know, balancing that against what is the charge, you know, for this group. So with that being said.
All right, well, we're gonna move into meeting of what we heard about, how we translated what we've heard about suggestions for the process into a potential overview of what that process might look like. I do just want to name as context for this, that we heard from some folks, issues around trust, right? Issues around trusting information, issues around knowing that we can really trust each other to be, you know, letting the data lead, right? And being open-minded. So when we think about this process, I think we're thinking about how do we build into this process opportunities for us to get that enhanced trust over time, right? So just to name a couple of things that came up, right? I think it's fine to be transparent about this. People concerned, you know, how did the town make this pivot and why? It seemed to happen very quickly. People saying, do we know enough? Can we trust what people say these different outcomes will look like, that they will actually look like that, right? Can we trust that the members will be neutral in our communications. That includes all the task force members, but also, NRC, right, the convener as well. Right, can we trust that we'll all follow the data, have the broader interest of the town in mind, even if it doesn't reflect our individual preferences? And how are we gonna manage the outside pressures and emotions? Because as we know, really hot button issue in the town. So I just want to name that that's where we're coming from, right? Those are real challenges, and we need to think about, building that trust, building into our process. So, this is a very high level overview on the slide here of how we imagine this process potentially unfolding based on some of the feedback that we've heard. So one of the pieces of feedback that was pretty clear is that for many folks, you really just feel like you don't have a clear enough picture of what these different alternatives look like, particularly when we can think about them with respect to all the different issues in the area, right? Road Park, rail trail, et cetera. Right, and you don't necessarily, not everyone really knows what does it look like when you dredge? What does it look like? What happens when you remove a dam, right? So we want to spend some time at the outset, really just sharing some basic background and kind of level setting on what these different alternatives look like. We gave you some readings on that today, and that's something to help begin that education process, but folks really feel like they need some more. So we're thinking at the outset here, maybe we begin with some presentations by EA, but with substantial input from you on what those need to include to be helpful, right? To try to level up, right? We really want to hear your input on what specific alternatives and ideas you want to hear about. Clearly, there's the big three that are already part of this, but what specifically, and we have a list of things that we can give to EA based on specifically what we heard that would take too long to go into today, but we have that. After that kind of basic level setting, there was a real strong feeling among a number of you, not in every call, but a number of you, and I think enough that it felt meaningful to us, suggested we have so much work to do. It's going to be really helpful and important to break into work groups. And also there's so much expertise in this group that we really want to leverage that. So can we separate into work groups, and maybe we need to spend some time digging in issue by issue, right? So let's take a look at the ecological issues, right? Can we do a deep dive on what do we know about how various alternatives perform on those ecological issues? Can we do a deep dive and spend a whole meeting, right? Led by potentially a work group, task force members. We've done some outside research and brought it in, and then bringing that to the group, answering questions, right? Identifying as a group what are unanswered questions we still need to learn more about. Right, so a series of meetings focused issue by issue on the pros and cons, on additional approaches or ideas that could improve these alternatives related to whatever the issue of that meeting is, and key unanswered questions. And I also just want to pause because you're going to note embedded in this number 2, and we're going to get to this in a second, is the idea that we've decided as a group and really clarified in advance of this conversation, what are the criteria? What really are we looking for these options to achieve, these alternatives to achieve, right? And we have that shared understanding before we get into the nitty gritty of each one of them. After that work, right, and that's going to take a while, right, to really bring these issues to light, then we're going to take a step back and start thinking about how can we package all these ideas that come out of these meetings into the best combination of ideas or approaches for the various alternatives we've had. We combine stuff that's really going to make this as good as it possibly can be. And maybe we're homing in on a single idea at that point, or maybe we're actually building up packages around different alternatives and then seeing where they land. But we heard pretty clearly from folks we need to be thinking systemically and packaging things together, and just saying, oh, it's either X or Y is not going to cut it, because people have pretty preconceived opinions about those. So we need to combine things and be creative. So that's where that comes in. And then there's a point at the end here where we're going to really need to evaluate those packages, what we've come up with against our criteria, and decide and try to build consensus and see if, maybe we all agree, or maybe we're going to need to do some compromising and see what people can live with. But there's going to be a consensus building process where we try to do that. And then once we feel like we've clarified where we're at, right, and whether that's agreement or not, we'll see. But we'll be drafting the document to reflect the outcome of our discussion. So that's kind of an arc give you a sense of where we're thinking. And I think you just want to pause and check, like, how does that sound? If we're taking you on a journey here from 1 through 5, you're now December 2nd, right? Does this seem like a reasonable overall approach? Great, David, go ahead.
Short answer is yes, but on the number one, basic background alternatives. That seems a little more focused than like our aspirations for what this would be, so I'm thinking. I'd like to hear, for instance, like from the recreation department on was the vision for the road park. For Bruce Freeman Trail, I want to understand Waters Pond within the broader context, so I thought of. What was the vision for Juro Park? What's the vision for walkable swim resources within Concord? I know there's been a lot invested in White Pond, but that's not walkable for.
So.
Well, it's walkable for people there, but it's not, you could get to. You could take the train from Concord Center to West Concord and walk. What are other, walkable options for fishing? And then the other is just, what's the vision for West Concord historic preservation? What is the historic commission to say about that and water pond within that?
Great, that's really helpful. So some broader kind of collective education around issues in Concord that relate to.
And I'll say this was really, these ideas were completely formed from reading the systems approach. And it's like, okay, well, that's what it said.
Yeah.
The idea of using that systems approach and those different lenses, from historical character, livability, et cetera, that's very important. Another thing I'd love to have a discussion around, maybe it's partly under basic background, is about the 2012 report that you had us read. I found that to be really fascinating. It's before we get into the question about dam removal or dredging. It's just a broad discussion about the condition of the pond. And there are things in there I read which I hadn't realized. And I'd love to have an open discussion with all of us about that. We would have a chance for one another and to have a sense as to what we learned from that basic report. Your fault.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think starting with the presentation by EA feels really quick, because we've all seen discussion, presentations by EA, we've kind of gone through those 3 options. And it kind of is like how we got here in the first place, is those 3 options being presented without any other alternative. And so it feels to me like, yes, like this thing.
I think on our end, the Zoom may have frozen.
Yeah, that's correct. On virtual also, we lost the sound and the screen's not advancing.
Okay.
I can see the screen advancing, but no sound. I don't know if anyone here can message someone there.
I'll message right now.
It would be like getting them to come and to share that general and not be a sounding board, but. I
We'll be
understand-
back in a minute, folks, on Zoom.
I wonder whether just the last report that ENA produced was only on those three options, but the 2011 report, they had a dozen different options. Many of which people have come up with since the whole idea of dam removal came up and were rejected back then. But it would be really good to have people who know the topic, like EA, not ENA, to say, to sort of say, well, there were these 12 options that we came up with, and we narrowed it down at that time to dredging. But, you know, at least put those back on the table and for us all be in the same place about that. That would help me a lot. I mean, that 2011 report I found really interesting. And
Was it ESS?
Yes,
Yes,
ESS, it wasn't EA.
Yeah.
No, it
Yes. I was thinking EPA did something before.
shows how much we think us.
As long as that meeting isn't about throwing things out, because I don't think we're there yet. As long as they're not here to say, we had 11 options.
No,
We're down to one.
not at all.
Or needs to be-
That's why that's a good.
Many options as
I don't,
either check them if they're unfeasible.
So I just want to, maybe should we take a quick time, sorry to interrupt, but I don't think we should just check in, we're having issues with the owl.
Yeah, it's fixed.
Yes, okay,
The owl has never been picking up the room, I don't believe.
not,
It's been picking up the audio. Can people on Zoom see the room?
You need to turn the video.
The videos on.
No, video.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
No, Alice is no.
Yeah. Okay. Charlotte, can you hear us? Give us a thumbs up if you can.
Charlotte, can you-
Yes.
Can you see the room?
I can see the room.
Okay, great.
all right. But I just want to maybe take a stab at summarizing what we're hearing here. There is an interest in kind of generally learning more about these alternatives, but that conversation cannot and should not be in any way around evaluating or excluding the alternatives, because that's our job. And we want this initial discussion to be very open, right? Is that effectively reflecting? Yeah, yes.
So I think so, yeah, I've been hearing the same thing, it's not interested in having presentations on alternatives that you already know about, evaluating why one is better than the other in the presentation, right? The angle that we were thinking when we talk about methods is really purely making sure that everyone on the task force has a kind of a common understanding of what sort of the mechanics of different methods are, because some of those alternatives might have been discarded because of methodological problems, you know, of knowing, you know, what the machinery looks like and what is physically involved in a dredge project or the disposing of the spoils, or, you know, other aspects that all of you are familiar with and have talked about. We just want to make sure that people understand that and understand how does the dam operate now, or can it be operated, you know, sort of the mechanics of things, not a huge time sink in learning, but just getting that basic information out. I don't know what your reactions are to that, if you're all well up on that, but it did come up.
I would love that, sorry. You want to speak first?
Oh, I think it'd be really helpful for that kind of discussion around, I know, I think I was one, I mentioned this for sure, I think, I don't, you know, my mom keeps being like, well, if your house is just gonna flood if we take out the dam. Or there's like some stuff around that, I don't know what it is, I want to be able to understand intellectually like what's gonna be happening. And personally, I find reading that kind of stuff, I feel like you need someone to, a lot of the more technical stuff, it's very hard to sort of, you know, read, picture, being able to hop back and forth.
That was what I.
So would it be helpful? Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I would just say, I would love to have maybe it's too simple or too complicated, but I'd love to have an initial meeting after this, where part of the meeting would be to discuss that report, 2011, 2012, whatever that report is, that has so much in it. And have us all to say, this is what we saw, this is what came out, this is not not eliminating anything. And also at that same, maybe it's the same meeting, I would love to have a discussion around Envision Concord. And what it means to use these criteria.
Yes.
Because I'm not, I mean, I can see them and talk about a lens from each of them, but I don't actually know practically how to go about going through this. So I'd love to have that be an initial meeting or 2 meetings of this committee. For us to go over that report, spend some time making sure we understand it, and then go over Envision Concord and how we can use this as a tool going forward for all of us.
So that's great, Bill, thank you. Yeah, and actually, I mean, I want to get to Delia in a second, but we do want to have an initial conversation on Envision Concord in just a minute, right? But that probably will not be the only. It will not be the
We
only.
did do a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's go to Delia, please.
I just wondered if it would be helpful for the group if we had EA do a presentation on all the alternatives. I mean, I think they have done that, but it's maybe too technical. So would it be helpful for them to present on the alternatives very briefly and then have it be more of a Q&A so that people can really understand
So which alternatives would they be presenting?
the ones for the 2012 watershed management.
That would be good. That does have everything in it, and all the different alternatives, including even chemical, I think.
It does, it has,
Yeah.
the only thing that was not evaluated in the 2012 watershed management plan was dam removal, because the dam, when we
Right.
started that watershed management plan, it was in 2010. So
Sure, well,
the dam had just been replaced,
Sure.
that's why it wasn't.
that's okay.
So I think that, dam removal should go into that analysis.
Sure.
The EA does.
Super neutral, nobody says, but those chemicals don't work well, like, if we don't get evaluation criteria until we get to the point where we understand them all.
Right. But I mean, I think that is the reality is that, because of the high flush rate.
I understand, but I think
Okay.
it's really important at this point that we just put them all on. And we can always come back and say, feels to me like we should spend $10 million on chemicals. Like, I don't know what's gonna come out of this, but we have to be able to say anything can come out of this today, right? At this very moment, we all as a task force have to be able to say, the information being given to us is neutral.
Well, but one thing, we'll say, Vicky, that the report itself, as you know, you read it, it gives you the pluses and minuses of all these things. It's
So
so,
we read that.
If you don't want to have, you don't want to have that, you're saying that you want to have the presentation of the information, but you don't want them to include the value in their presentation.
Because that's in here already.
Right, and
And we already know they came to 3, and we already know that NRC came with 1, right, which was dam removal. We know that process.
right, so you're,
I say we need to step back. So I don't want to follow that same process in one meeting. I want to.
right.
Vicky, my mistake, because I may be,
Yeah.
that 2012 report doesn't come down with the same.
No, it does not.
So that's why it's a great report, because it does have both sides of all the issues. And that's why I think it'd be a great way of just
Yeah.
reviewing that with us. Yeah.
Yes, I was just trying to check with Vicky that what you're saying is really the presentation side that would help the judge.
Yeah, right. Because we've been in
Because you
meetings
can-
where there's
you
been
can do that.
judgment about
Yes.
recreation and judgment even
Oh, yeah,
here
I
about,
think there's a
recreation and all
needle
that.
that we need to thread here.
Yeah.
And I would just say, Rachel, we'll work with EA on this, and I think it might also be an opportunity for, us to get feedback from select people.
Yes,
to help us
to help.
thread that needle
Yeah.
appropriately.
It's part of building the trust back,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is underlying a lot. of
Yeah,
this. It's
yeah.
So important, so.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to move on to another slide here, and this, Bill, gets a little bit to what you were pointing us towards. So we, when we, are working through this work plan, one of our first tasks, I think if you were really suggesting, Bill, is going to be clarifying what our criteria are. What are we evaluating these alternatives against? What does good look like? What are the characteristics of good, right? So we have in our charge a mandate to look at Envision Concord as the source for those criteria. Obviously, we're going to need to apply those ourselves, and we need to think about what is relevant and important for our work, for Warner's Pond and the broader system that it's part of. So we wanted to have a conversation today just to get started on that and see, can we begin to form potential set of criteria based on, or I would say, elements, right, based on the criteria that are here, that we are mandated to follow. So you see those on the screen. We have history and character, livability and values, mobility, environmental sustainability, fiscal sustainability, right? Those come from the Envision Concord report, and we put in some of the language from the report there that is sort of some of the high level themes with respect to each of those, all that criteria. And you also have handouts that have that kind of one-page summary of the Envision Concord and how it treats those 5 criteria. And we want to have a conversation now, and the prompt is up there on the screen, but when we think about applying these criteria to Warner's Pond, applying them in our deliberations, what elements do you think are most relevant? What elements do you think are most important for us to consider? Right? How should we essentially translate what's in Envision Concord for our purposes, right, or apply it for our purposes? And we'd love just to hear, you know, what do you think, right? And how would we start listing off the elements and the criteria that we need to be considering? And we can, you know, I'm gonna take this down from the screen because we have Envision Concord. And I'm gonna take some notes while we hear a brainstorm from you all. So, what do you think?
The Envision Concord document has an excellent checklist.
Yeah.
You have that's not that way. I mean, it's a really good starting point for each of those areas. I think it's premature for us, as we don't actually have any options right now to be considering. We have to follow the Envision Concord format, and they've laid out very clearly for us how we should be evaluating any options that come forward. Sure.
Yeah, so I guess absolutely, right? And I think the question 100% I agree, that's right. And you might just say that we should just go by that checklist, right? And just, we don't have to do any work ourselves to further define what these criteria mean in this context. That might be what the task force decides. If that's a thing, great. I think the question is, what else can we say, right? Is there more to say in addition to that would be helpful?
Right. One thought is also to flip this a little bit and think about the important values that you have attributed to Warner's Pond, the hopes and concerns that you have, the goals that you have for any project that's done here, and fit those specifically into this checklist or criteria list for Envision Concord, because it's not always as straightforward as it might seem.
I have a question for Mark. Mark, has any other town committee used these criteria to come to a decision?
I was trying to think about that. It gets me like the comprehensive sustainability plan and potentially the municipal vulnerability assessment. I think those are two efforts that have taken place in the last, since Envision Concord was completed, that did try to use some of that.
Some of them, they didn't.
Yeah, and that's just going from memory, but I actually already made a note to try and figure out who's actually used it before. Because I think that would be an interesting way to sort of start.
And even to hear from someone who feels it was successful to use this criteria, I can see us getting bogged down too by this.
Yeah.
So Gary Kleiman, who is on the Natural Resources Commission, was one of the, he was involved in putting it together.
I feel like the comprehensive sustainability.
That I don't know, but we can find out.
When they tried to put together their climate goals, and I thought that they worked with that, but it could have been that the things were under development at the same time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, so interwoven in the vision plan, to see, I don't know if people are aware, but Warner's Pond is mentioned like 8 or 9 times in the document, so I think that might be a good starting point to try to have frame on within this criteria, might actually already be done. So I don't know if you just do a Google search, you find a page where Warner's Pond is mentioned. You start there.
Great. I only printed and read the section, so it's not in the section we were directed,
Right.
but you're saying more broadly in the document.
And if folks are interested, I think, Keith, we could send out some of the references to the DEU, if you're familiar with what they are. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when I read just the community criteria, the thing that really struck me was that that there wasn't some emphasis on preservation of natural resources and all that. I was very surprised, like under environment and sustainability, it talks about carbon neutral, carbon sequestering, water efficient municipal services. Nothing in that paragraph talks about, I mean, in the checklist, it certainly does. But I guess I was very surprised at the dearth of that within this criteria.
And also add, I think it's like page 93, it talks about the importance of preserving the built environment.
Yes.
So it actually called out dams as something to consider. Preserving. So encourage everyone to read that page as well. Yeah, so David's point, the checklist does pick up on those other elements of environmental sustainability. Wildlife, 100%. So we take this summary page in the context of
Well, I mean, it does mention the town sustainability goal, which I have, but I looked them up and they were kind of more broad, less clear than. I copied them yesterday, so I didn't forget. But they were also more broad based. Specifically, they're around. Reducing dependence on fossil fuels and chemicals, reducing encroachment on nature, but also meeting human needs fairly efficiently. So it looks like the overall.
So is that maybe something we could have work groups focus on, like, again, because, yeah, it's sort of the rabbit hole. Different reports, kind of like elevation, other elements that are nested. It's necessary.
Yeah, right, yeah, and I think, yes, right, and we can certainly do that, and we can have folks come back with a proposal. Right, I think we can also share with you all, some of the specific goals that you named in our conversations, right, which I would say overlap. Basically 100%,
Yeah.
yes, with what's envisioned under.
There's
Right.
some aspects of the mobility piece.
Yeah. We did not hear.
We didn't hear that, and we're sure how the task force would interpret that, so, we're not gonna take it into account, obviously, but. For everyone to have a clear understanding of what the criteria are that you're gonna use, and how you would apply them to. Permanent. That's really gonna be the tool, trying to sort out where to go.
Seems to me that this is, this is one of our tasks, so it seems that we get to the options. We're gonna have to have this spreadsheet that says, how does this, if you were to score it 1 to 10 on history and character, option A gets a 3, and this one gets a 5, and another one for livability and values, like, we're gonna have to use this filter
Yeah.
for the options
Right.
when we get there. Like, we're going to have to put it through this, like, one of them's gonna be better for mobility than another.
Right.
One of them's gonna be better for livability than another, and it's, you're gonna rise to the top after you get through all this.
That's right.
It's almost like, these connection circles. And that you list, okay, so this is one option. And how does that one option, so say it's dredging. How does this one option affect all of these things? How do they, what's the cause and effect? What do they connect to each other? And then you take a look at the next the next idea. And how does that all fit in? Do they all have a part of that? Are they all a part of these different criteria? And then you look at the next one. Well, if this one doesn't fit our criteria, well, then we don't have to deal with that anymore. But if this other idea, it says, oh my goodness, we fit all the criteria. So that's a good one that we can look at. And then once we have some of those, well, which one seems to make the most sense? You know, which one do we think is a better way to go based on all this criteria? But you have to, I think, look at each one individually and how they fit into the criteria.
But yeah, I think you're all saying it. It seems like there's a common understanding about that. I'm curious about how y'all feel about that, because it's a lot to take on. I mean, not how you feel about it, but how you feel. What do you feel about how to start?
If we're looking at all the lists that we read about for our homework for today, that's a huge list. Okay, so can we maybe take a look at here's the different chemical ones, here's, you know, the dredging, here's the hydro rating, and look at the different avenues there, and maybe we can just knock some of those off right away. They don't make sense. They don't fit our criteria. And that way, okay, so we looked at them and we said, you know, we don't think they're part of it. What are the other options? Yeah, which is your idea of getting the technical information, so we can do that.
So, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go to David and then I have a question I'd like to.
Yeah, just
go ahead.
looking at the notes there, and I think we want to do more than just use the checklist, but I think we want to make sure we understand it. This page on the community, it's like I say, I was shocked when I didn't see certain things within it, like, let's understand what it means. It's just a little different than just use the checklist.
Yeah, yes, you use and understand.
Yeah. Right, the common understanding.
Yeah.
Right.
Too, so that you don't have end up in arguments or rabbit holes about what is the meaning of. Right, that's part of it is.
Right.
Understanding it.
Yeah, go Bill, go ahead.
I wonder if it'd be useful, I put down with you and what Christine said, for us to, and even Jeff was suggesting, for us to rewrite, you know, short interpretive way, what each of these criteria would mean for us in regard to Warner's Pond. Some of them clearly are not, have any meaning whatsoever. Some of them are significant. I mean, these are pretty generic. And if we could write up something for each of these and get buy-in by the group, then we have basic statements that we know we can turn to, touchstones for each of these criteria.
Yeah.
And that might be something even subcommittees could do, you know, to pick up and write up one of these statements, get the rest of us to buy in and move on.
So Bill, I want to test with you sort of what that might look like. Kind of after a reflection.
Sure.
Yes. No, so you can go ahead, but yeah.
I was gonna suggest what David pointed out, which is there's no mention of natural resources necessarily in environmental sustainability. That's something we'd want to see written into that criteria for ourselves. And we want that written in. We know the specific history and character of West Concord that's tied into Warner's Pond. We'd like to be able to make that statement very clear when we're using that as our touchstones, our basis for making decisions. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah. So essentially what you're imagining, and I want to kind of summarize, I think what I'm hearing from you and from some others in terms of how we would use this is some point early in this process, potentially, like we could even start this between now and the next meeting, right? And see, but we'd get a group of folks together who would really review in detail what's in Envision Concord, sit down together and say, just like you said, how do we rewrite these criteria in a short interpretive way into what it means for Warner Pond. So it might be like we have, you know, history and character, home. How well does the alternative, or the package, or whatever we're considering, uphold the recent and long-term history of development and infrastructure on Warner's Pond? That's what you would say, right? But that's an example. How well does the proposed alternative do this other thing with respect to history and character? And you're pulling out what's in the document and you're reframing it in a way that applies to this resource. And you're doing that for each of these, right? And so that'd be we agree on that. from the outset as for the key queries that we need to be asking and evaluating upon. Then, as we get on, right, later in our deliberations, or once we actually have these packages and we work through them and we think we have a couple that are worth evaluating, we as a group can do, you know, an exercise, right, to see how we think they score. We can do that, you know, we can do a numerical thing, but, right, we can do a survey, right?
Caps,
Right.
we can do one.
But I would just suggest, having done that in many groups in the past, and what I think you would all agree with, it's not gonna be like, we're just gonna take whichever has the highest score.
Right,
Okay,
not, it doesn't.
we will use that to feed into further deliberation on why do we think these did better? Where do we think we actually want to land as a group, right? But they would be really important to inform the deliberation. So I'm gonna just test, does that seem like a reasonable way to kind of move forward? And I think I'm pulling that from what you said. Yeah, so we need a little interpretive work, but yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I would just say that those summaries that you described, which I like, would ideally be sort of elicited from these other express.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
They.
We can
Yeah.
create it.
Yes, they,
Yes.
we all spend
It's
a minute
created.
meeting.
Yes, it's created from your values, the things that you would have attached and expressed about the pond.
You being the community in these various documents. I guess what I'm saying, what is the town, what is the plan be for environmental sustainability? Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
Where does it have to be?
I think
Yes.
we are mandated, right, to use this document, because I think that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
it can't be like, what do we think the town should care about,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
what says it, this is our resource, yeah, okay, I think that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
I would rush to say, to point out that Vision Concord was a piece of work that was done by a very strong group of people. It was a bridge to 2030, written in 2018, completed in 2018. So we're halfway to 2030 now, just using my calendar. So we've learned some things along the way. And so I think that it points towards a fairly strong process in the interdisciplinary approach that it provides for is, you know, been well accepted at this stage, but I think we should also understand that we're going to need to apply some learnings that we've had since then to the criteria. So I'm all completely supportive of the criteria, but I don't want to feel constrained by these exact buckets, recognizing that this particular resource is one that does, you know, if we sort of looked at the Venn diagram and what it covers, it has relatively little, you know, transportation kinds of things and quite a few more environmental considerations. So we should focus in on that way. And then, you know, I continue to introduce the notion that it's also sitting right across the street from 60 acres of land that we need to be thinking very deeply about at the moment. And we can't and should not overlook the sort of, you know, impact on West Concord and the character of West Concord that's in there. I almost said this one before when we were talking about the hopes and dreams. I didn't see the phrase, well, you know, character of West Concord or West Concord, I think only appeared once as a set of words in that. And I think this is very important to what that community center looks and feels like. Yeah. Kind of apply that.
I wanted to go back to you, and I'm sorry, I forgot. Jeff. Does what Mark just said, does that connect with what you expressed?
Thank you, because I wanted to follow up, because I don't really express myself, but yeah, we're not only bound by this document, but we're referencing also different space recreation facilities and other expressions of county tenants that we can use. As it's been expressed in some of these documents. And I think coming from documents is helpful because all of us start from scratch. It's a whole process in itself, right? Some of us neighbors have come to the sense.
Mark, do you feel like Jeff's response with that, like looking at a little broader set of documents to help update some of these, was that kind of
Yeah.
address the
Absolutely, and that was the short version is, we need to build on what's already there. And because there has been a lot of good work done, but, you know, time is passing, time has passed. And so there's an opportunity to apply some new learnings since then.
One other thing that said earlier, people have used these, so we can see the phrase in which people have used is interpreting the thing, kind of building that as well.
Okay, well, this has been super fruitful and helpful conversation for us. Thank you, and I mean, my instinct is, you know, we'll see what the next meeting looks like, but we need quickly to get some folks working on that and coming back to us with some suggestions. So let me go to one more slide here. So I think it's supposed to be with you all. Another piece that we got feedback on from you all was around public input. So we wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about this. So generally, this is just basically what we heard from you. We heard that it's important to educate people about our process, right? Because first of all, it's the right thing to do, and second of all, this is going to go up for a vote at town meeting. So we want people to know what we're doing, and be informed and clear about why we're coming up with the ideas we are. We heard a number of methods suggested for doing that, for getting public input and sharing out with the public. So there was suggestion that, you know, there's been a lot already done, meetings, polls, etc. There's questions around, you know, how helpful or neutral or whatever those might be. So we can look at it, use it, but need to recognize limitations of that, but still should be part of the process. There's a suggestion that we should pretty quickly have an article in the Concord Bridge on behalf of the task force to name what we're doing, say some statement, educate folks, right, around the purpose of this and the opportunity. Some suggestions that maybe we can use social media when it comes to kind of getting attention to either our meetings or designated public meetings that we're going to have separate from our process. And generally, we need to do some outreach to let people know that these meetings are happening. And there's also suggestion that at some point, maybe not every meeting, but we should have some space for public comment as part of these meetings as well, to keep tabs on how people are receiving this process and what they're hearing. Another idea that came out there was we could have representatives from other groups that are doing important work in Concord that relate to what we're doing, maybe come to some meetings, share what they're doing if it's relevant, and we can share out with them specifically what we're up to. Maybe a public survey could work as well. So those are some kind of general methods, and then we also had suggestions around when we do designated public meetings, what those should look like. So suggestion, we both need to share out and take in. So it's both information sharing and consultative. So there need to be some open listening sessions. Probably an early one needs to happen where once we clarify our approach, we just say, you know, here's who we are. You can come to our meetings and share out sort of our process and approach. And then a later one, once we actually have something clear to share, if we want to test the waters. There was also some suggestion around maybe we want to do some kind of a charrette.
The chair of this committee.
With the public.
There is.
And then just to name a challenge that is not unique to this process, but I think we heard about, is just that there are some people who are very engaged in this already, and there are others who are not, right? That, you know, relates to any number of things, right? Vicinity to the pond is one of them, but not the only thing. But how do we get the full temperature of the town and really test our ideas in a way that accounts for the fact that there are very energized people and that matters, but there are also people who aren't, and their opinions also. So that's, I think, a summary of what we've heard around public input, and, you know, just wanted, we have a few minutes here, but we are going to have to wrap in a couple. But anything here, you know, that people have questions about or concerns about that you're seeing? Yeah, please.
Yeah, just agree, we have to get input from the outside, but dangers that we can be derailed very, very quickly, especially if we talk social media and things. I had experience in this town meeting, which was very ugly. I would not, I would not have us as a working group being exposed to things, which will lead to major distractions. We're a working task force. And we have to think about our working streams and where in the specific working stream we want to engage in very specific input. Ideally, from my perspective, from experts, than from, let's say, opinion leaders. I rather prefer experts to opinion. And that's for me the major thing to look at is how, if we engage input from the outside, I would prefer expert.
So and then also the point that we don't want to be deliberate, having conversations about on social media. Help our clients.
And it will distract us heavily from what people write on social media. This can get very bad.
So we can take one or two more comments on this, and I think, people can also email Rachel and I, not the task force, but you can email us with further thoughts on this issue as well. But that's okay. Let's get some quick comments from David and Vicky.
Okay, I agree, because I think we got all the opinions and that led to the task force. But I do think it's important that we do some broadcasting of what's going on, because again, I'm thinking it could help to reduce us getting approached from people saying what's going on, that we have the task forces, point out there publicly. So even just saying, here's how we're gonna go about it, we're organized and we're working together.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar, that I think in the interest, because I totally agree with you about what's going on social media. But I think in the interest of complete transparency, to not have 3 or 4 meetings go by where we're not reporting back to the town. And so if there were a way to say, meeting number 1, here's what the task force did, meeting number 2, we're going to do this, we're going to go out to the fund on March 15th or whatever it is. And I think we owe it to the town to be completely transparent. I don't want it to be like something's happening behind closed doors. So conversations should be open, not just to people who are attending.
I think that definitely a very good, the communication to the bridge or whatever goes on should be one of the first tasks of the elected co-chairs.
Okay.
Small thing, I know some committees have representatives who are observers, and that may not be a bad thing. When, for example, finance committee often has someone who sits in as an observer, and it's very helpful for a committee. It was true for us on the tax fairness committee. League of Women Voters have often had an observer. That gets a lot of information dispersed to a lot of people in town, groups like that. So you might think about those kind of observers.
And just to sort of follow on that, the League of Voters does their first Fridays, and that's an opportunity, maybe partway through this process where, the task force can go and, because those are well attended, 40, 50 people attendance.
Great, thank you guys. So additional comments, I think we welcome written by email. We want to return to the issue of the vote for the co-chairs. And this, we could very quickly do a vote if we want to, but I want to test sort of now that we've heard some more and had some conversation, where is the group on this issue? What people think, should we move forward with the vote? Should we?
I think we should go forward.
Move forward without a vote.
With the vote.
With the vote, yeah.
Not very exciting. Yeah. The meeting is open, the motion needs to be adjourned. Have the chair elected, but games removed. That's going to be process. Another piece is, I think, from my perspective, I'm not voting member, so I get out easier. But one of the things that I was thinking about as I was sitting here, and I was watching, just observing and listening. Nice thing was like I could hear from the 3 people who were there, so it was actually kind of nice to think about the level of thinking. And I think that all of you are bringing that higher level of thinking, and also being accepting of what other people can do, sort of encouraging the fact. And and I think about how things go in my community. Here, and I wanted to sort of like bring that up. They think about how we do it. Or how I would suggest thinking about. One of the things that we see in public domain, and I've been an elected official. I've sat on statewide commissions in Massachusetts, and I just thought about looking around the room and thinking about how my community operated and how that operated. One of the things that became very clear, like from a natural living society. And you're not trying to influence how you go about the book, and everything else, but my grandmother sort of like jumped up in front of me as I was watching. And I remember her sort of expressing this. It's like, you know, the ideas of democracy, the basis of democracy, were put out by this thing called the Great Law, which was Muhammad showing of the Great Law Nation. One of the things is that every deliberation is very intentional, and that it includes every deliberations, and there's no difference between male and female except for how we each see the work. And there's a unique opportunity within the street communities, all now, is that men have, my grandmother used to say, men can do whatever women allow them. And she meant that very, very serious way. Men, we have a tendency to envision the world very straight on, almost blinders, because our objective in life is to really sort of drive home, get to the point, get it done, get out. We're provided, we're protected, we're hunters, we're gaps, we take care of it. We're women, sort of see things in a broader perspective. So everything that we would bring up within ourselves, within our community, and the men who make a decision, and then we put it by the women. Of course, they never truly disagreed with us, but they would put parameters that were in the best interest of the community. And I was thinking about that, I was sitting here because we have a unique opportunity to have a male and a female perspective that have those two languages, that claims, and that move forward within the way of thinking and moving forward, and being able to make sure that those ideas are expressed as a committee as you move forward. I think it's just a great learning opportunity for all of us to be able to have that perspective. So as I was thinking about it, when I first heard two, and I was like, oh, work. Then three of them, oh. But then my grandmother kind of slapped me in the face with me. You gotta make sure that you express this, because when we think about the lands that we're on, those are the way those people operate. So
Yeah.
it could be a really interesting way to sort of like think about how you proceed forward. Just an idea, just a suggestion. All you voting members, good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bruce, I appreciate that. That's great. So I wanted to just check in with, I mean, Malcolm, do you think we should just go do a vote? Are you suggesting a vote for
Well, I
co-chairs or, yeah?
I think that Bruce's point is very valid. And I think it would be a shame if we ended up with two men as co-chairs. I absolutely think we should have a male and a female co-chair. So as Christine is the only unopposed female, I think that she should be a co-chair from that perspective. I would, as a member, I would put forward a motion that Christine be nominated and I can't think of the right word, elected as co-chair.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to nominate and approve Christine as one of the co-chairs.
Co-chairs, yes.
Any further discussion on that?
Any further discussion?
So we can now do a.
Are we
All
ready
in
for?
favor?
Aye. All in favor? Aye. Okay, all opposed? Okay, so by the abstaining? Okay, so it sounds like by unanimous consent, okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Christine.
Hopefully you won't be all like.
Now, we both.
And, like, so Congratulations. Is there another motion or proposal on how we'd like to handle the two individuals who are still in the running here? Who have expressed an interest?
I guess I would just like to ask, now that you know who the other co-chair is, are you both still interested?
Yes. Yes.
So David, you have a proposal for how you'd like this?
I think we can both handle it. I think just that's just a regular. Second.
Do a specific vote, okay,
Yeah.
so there's a motion on the table to just do
Is this a straw? Is this a straight poll?
It's just very.
a straw poll.
How do we do this?
Maybe one suggestion could be that we could, the two voting alternatives could be, you know, raise your hand for Bill, raise your hand for Malcolm, and then we'll just.
Right.
See
No,
what one-
yeah, it's not straw,
It's
it's
it's an A or B
Yeah,
kind of choice, so we don't have to. It's probably more straightforward than asking people to vote twice, which could
Yeah.
end up in a tie.
Okay. And that's our, we're procedurally, this is permissible to just do this right now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, all right, so we'll do this now. We're gonna vote. Everyone gets one vote. So Bill or Malcolm. All in favor of Bill as the co-chair, raise your hand. Okay, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All in favor of Malcolm, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so. Oh, and online, yes, thank you.
No,
We don't
Saul's
have any
not voting.
voting members.
Saul's not on the call.
He is on the call.
Oh.
He's
He's active, yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we have our two co-chairs, fantastic, so we accomplished that order of business. Yeah. Oh, non-voting members, 6 to 3. Thank you for that clarification. So I'm, yeah.
Oh, right,
that's
okay.
why I didn't- Oh, we didn't vote. Yeah.
I think we
Yeah,
still need to do a formal vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So
Oh, we have a
somebody
full
needs to
vote?
nominate Bill and then just do a show.
I nominate them.
That's what I meant by straw.
Yeah.
Yes.
second,
So nomination for Bill has been seconded.
any discussion?
Yeah.
all those in favor?
All in favor?
Just raise your hand.
Should have made Christine call for that vote.
So let's just do it officially, clearly. So all in favor of the motion for Bill to be co-chair, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed. Okay. And I think we had some abstentions. Right. Okay, so,
Okay,
all right,
done,
done.
thank
Okay.
you, congratulations.
Thank you, congratulations to our co-chairs. So, we are a little bit over time, so apologies for that, but I think it's worth it to get our business concluded. Just want to share finally some next steps with you all. We are going to follow up. We hear the request for meeting scheduling to be far in advance. So we're going to offer some suggestions. I would just say it seems like early evenings in person if possible, shifting between West Concord, having some in West Concord felt important to people. Right, and we have,
Shift days.
yeah, shift days a little bit, yeah, but that seems to be where we got the most momentum, so we'll send out some dates. I don't think we need another poll at this point, but if we need to, we can. We'll send out draft minutes for your review. Rachel and I also have it on our to-do list to revise our summary of calls, accounting for some of the input we received from you today, so thank you for that, we will do that. For in terms of the work with the co-chairs, we will circle up with you all, but I think we've heard an interest in a common bridge article. We've heard a potential interest in convening a work group around criteria of development, so we may do that. We'll consult with you all, and we also want to, we would suggest develop a more fleshed out work plan that's a little more formal, that we can put in front of the full group, and we want to do that in consultation with our co-chairs. So we'll work on that and send that out for the group to review. So any questions about any of these items? Great, okay. Thank you all. Oh, so
Sorry,
Yes,
this question, can there be a list of what we're supposed to have read? I think there's been like all kinds of emails and web pages and just so that we're all on the same page.
like a single resource on the
Yeah,
website.
somebody came with
Okay.
an email afterwards,
Yeah.
and they kept corrected. And so I just
So
wanna
maybe
have
we
one
can
place
put that online.
where I can see what we're supposed to do.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we'll get it out in. Okay.
Also for the minutes, I would just suggest that the email that contained the explanation that you gave verbally at the beginning of the meeting about CBI's previous role, that should be included.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Definitely, and we have a colleague actually who's running online and taking their notes for us while it's going, so we should have everything there. Yeah, please.
Is it possible to record
These meetings are recorded.
And the Zoom link is on the website.
Yeah.
and so we can get? the recording?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
the MMN has done a good job. They put up our first meeting is already available there.
Yeah, and it's on the Corners Pond Task Force.
Yeah.
So that's all in one place. We'll put the reading plan on that as well.
Okay, so I see a hand from a member of the public, and I'll just apologize, we don't have public comment on the agenda for this meeting, so I don't believe we can take that today. But
Yeah, I mean, I would say if we were not over, that we would. You know,
We could do it.
We could do it,
okay,
but since we are.
all right, so thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll-
So chairs.
So we-
All right, okay, so can I have a motion for us to?
You don't have to, you can just adjourn the meeting.
I just adjourned you, I have a motion.
You don't have to, you can just adjourn.
We're all on the same.
Go ahead, Christine.
Go ahead, I'll let you adjourn the meeting.
All right.